We are live, everybody. Welcome to a live discussion of the greatest trilogy you've never heard of. The Heaven Tree Trilogy by Edith
Ye-
Pargeter. Thanks to Jenny Wirtz for introducing us to this magnificent series. And it's been a joy reading with both Jenny Wirtz and Jake from Nerd Level Rising. How are you both doing today? Jenny, how are you doing?
Oh, fantastic. I'm on top
Awesome,
of it all.
awesome. I have a feeling that after this, we're just going to ask you for just give us a list of everything that should be read that people don't know about. I think that would be a great series of books to go down the rabbit hole
How long do you want to sit here? That would have to be at the end.
of.
the live stream I did with Nico from Nico's book
Yeah,
reviews sort of turned into that, right, Janny? We got so many things. We got a list from that, so we can go back and
that's
watch that stream
awesome.
again. Yeah.
Compare notes. Yeah.
Yes. I'm
And
doing
Jake, how
great.
are you, man?
I'm fantastic, man. Thank you so much for hosting this. I've
Oh
been
yeah.
looking forward to talking to both of you. This has been unexpectedly so awesome. But before we read book one, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this that much, guys. I don't know.
Hmm.
There's no wizards, there's no whatever, but it was amazing. So excited to talk about it.
Absolutely.
There's
Yeah.
always magic in a well told story.
Hmm.
Well said.
Yeah. So true. Yeah, I mean, for me, I felt the same as you, Jake, actually. Yeah, I love historical fiction. It was a new discovery for me personally. And I wanted to read more of it, but I didn't really know where else to turn. I was going to read Pillars of the Earth, and then Jenny thankfully steered me in the right direction, us in the right direction. And I was just taken by how beautifully written it is and also how grounded the characters were. It was like one of the biggest surprises of the year for me, too. And I get the feeling, if one was to think of this omnibus as like one story, then this might be, book of the year for me because it was that compelling. But yeah,
The
I
historical part of it is really just the setting.
yeah.
The real heart of the story is the characters and their convictions and their interactions against that backdrop. But what Edith Pargeter did with singular force was her beautiful depiction of that time period with all of its flaws and all of its differences to the way we live now. So it was almost like stepping into another world. I don't see that any fantasy reader would have trouble adjusting to this book
No,
because it
I
wasn't
agree.
about
Yeah.
spouting facts about the time period. It was about that time period being the backdrop, the world building for this exceptional interaction between characters.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
well said. That's kind of this is going to sound like a really weird comparison, but it felt similar at times to like Song of Ice and Fire in the sense that
Mm.
there's not a ton of magic here. There's no like magic in this, but like it's just so the setting is so rich and the characters are just so well defined that it kind of felt like sort of like that to me in some way, without the dragons and less war, things like that.
And without the huge note of cynicism about human nature.
Mm.
True,
Yeah.
that's very true. The tone is very different.
Tone is very
Um,
different.
yeah.
So
I
yeah, I'll
guess
have some interesting things to say when we get to spoilers, but
sure.
why should people read this book?
Why? Well, I'll tell you what. As somebody who was very hesitant, and I did this, Janny, because I respect you so much. I was like, if anyone knows a good story, it's going to be her.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to give her the benefit of the doubt and try this. So to the skeptics out there like myself, this if you say that you are a character first reader, like I can't think of a better example of a set of characters who are so well defined. Like from the moment you meet them, you know who they are, what they want. You're following along. Sometimes their decisions might surprise you a little bit. Like nothing is super predictable, but everything is very consistent, and it just leads you down. The word that I keep using when I talk about this on my channel is it's always inevitable. Like
Mm.
everything is perfectly logical and makes sense, and the characters whose motivations conflict with each other leads to some really interesting situations that you're like, where is this going to go? And then something happens and nothing else could have happened. Nothing else would have made sense, but somehow it still was surprising in the moment. It's great. That's the thing that stands out to me the most is the characters, and then especially you mentioned the setting, the language, the tone, the way creativity is described. I think those are really, really, really special here.
The conflict of the heart, where
Yeah.
the common ground is the beauty of art. That's what draws
Yes.
these two characters together, and you think that they're total opposites,
Mm-hmm.
but they
Yeah.
each, in their own way, it's about the opposition and facets of the heart. And when you read the whole arc of the whole thing, it is not straightforward. But we'll
No.
get to that in the spoilers.
I felt, I felt every step of the way it continued to surprise me. The way book one ended was surprising and yet, like Jake said, inevitable. It was beautifully constructed. It didn't feel like a gimmick, something coming out of left field, for the sake of subverting expectations or whatever you want to call it. I felt like in the second book, it was the same thing, You see a POV shift that you kind of, at least for me, I was really attached to the way the first book was kind of structured. So I was like, how will I like this as much? I liked it even more, And then it was the same thing with the classic like protagonist versus antagonist. None of that went the way one would expect. And yet it feels like, I don't know if this makes sense, but it's like, when you see something through a main character's eyes, you think the story's about them, but the way she crafted it, it was really about them all, It was about them all, and they were equally important in this play. It almost feels like.
No cheap shots.
Yeah.
No cheap shots. She didn't mislead you. She didn't blindside you. She didn't do things that were tricky. She didn't try to fool you. She didn't obfuscate the information. She absolutely went blood and thunder straight to the heart of the matter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I admire. It takes a really good storyteller to do that, where there are no tricks up their sleeve.
Yeah.
Where it's all right in front of you from the very first page.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
Janie, can I ask, do you feel that this directly impacted the way that you write? Because I find that both this and Wars of Light and Shadow is like, everything is exactly there on the page. If you read it, you know exactly what's going on, what everyone's feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it doesn't feel like anyone's holding your hand. It doesn't feel like anyone's just spoon feeding you everything. I don't know how to describe it. It's so clear and right there in front of you. But it just feels...
My formative reading years were before the mass market paperback was a big thing.
Okay.
And especially even the inexpensive price where people could buy what was called a pocketbook for a quarter. It was still beyond my allowance. So I was reading hardback books from the library and classics and whatever I could get my hands on. Sure. So the time period and the writing of that time period was richer now. And publishing was a gentleman's business. They didn't have profit and loss statements. They were not looking for everything to be a hit. They were not looking for... A book was published because an editor somewhere thought it was worthy to be published. And they needed only a very small profit margin to make the whole thing go. So it was a different time period. Vocabulary was bigger. This was before the news decided third grade reading level was where it stopped.
Yeah.
Because they wanted more people to access the news, so they clipped off. Instead of making people reach for bigger, they shortened stride. So it was a different time period. So did this book influence me? Hundreds of books that were written at this time influenced me.
Sure.
And I don't like the cheap shot. I don't like the cheap shot cliffhanger. I don't like the trick up the sleeve where you get the tomato surprise. I like a more deliberate approach. So this book, right up my alley, but was it the only one that influenced me? No.
Sure.
It was one of the top reads of my life, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
No question. And it's because of the complexity of the characters, not just the style in which the story was told, but the masterful way she played those two characters. And I don't want to spoil, all the way through to the end where you realize the revelation that as the bottom drops out from under what you thought you were seeing is not a cheap shot. It was in front of you all the way along.
Yep.
Probably time to start spoilers soon. People need to read this book.
Yes.
What about you, Nikhil?
Yeah, no, I felt like it was just something that really just blew my mind about the book was that each installment I liked better than the last when I felt like it couldn't possibly be topped. And I think it's because like Edith Pargeter went for the subtlety of characters. You know, relationships in the novel are kind of imperfect. They have more layers to them. And then of course like the protagonist antagonist, like keeping this all high level, their relationship and how it evolves over time, and how kind of both sides have their own sense of moral identity tied to their actions, you know. And how I guess in the second book you see a POV and a parallel to what the POV in the first book, you know, what would they have done in these particular instances, you know, almost following in the footsteps of. um yeah, I couldn't believe where it went in that third book, and I loved that she went so, it was such a bold move to make, but also it felt inevitable, if that makes sense, you know. It felt like that's exactly what's right for these characters, and that's what the story needs. But yeah, I mean, I think like there were some confrontational sequences throughout the trilogy, but every single one they felt like they added to that moment. It wasn't like, oh, we haven't had enough action for a while. Now we need to, you know, to have something to balance it out. It was never like that. And even kind of the way everything concludes, it's not in that traditional, you know, big confrontation that, you know, it's not the same. It's not the same way that you would see it in other series, I think. I,
She did an
yeah,
incredible job, and I'm going to stray on to spoiler territory here.
sure.
An incredible job taking two characters, one of whom was embittered and cynical and older, where he had unbreakable ethics, unbreakable ideals, and he had shattered himself against the shortfalls of everybody else.
Hmm.
And it turned him cruel because of his disappointment in the humanity of the people around him, the shortfalls, the human shortfalls. And here's Harry, who is not enamored of his society. The whole chivalric code meant nothing to him. Kindness, the heart, and his art was everything.
Hmm.
And he would throw it all in the hopper for those ideals, just as Isambard, disappointed in the chivalric code letting him down, where all of his perfect loyalty to his king and all of his dedication to his knightly prowess, all of that stuff, was disappointed by the poor decisions of the people in leadership. He never broke away from that. He never matured from it. So you
Yeah.
have these two characters brought together by their love of beauty, because that's the one thing that did not let Isambard down, and the one thing that was Harry's holy grail.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So they were on a collision course right from chapter one, because Harry's kindness versus Isambard's cruelty, Harry's fresh take and his youthful idealism, and his also his ability to keep his word, come
Yeah.
whatever the cost. So Isambard kept his word where everybody else failed him.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And you notice that they were fine until that moment where Harry sent the king back to the Welsh king, sent the child back to the Welsh king.
Right. Right.
And that forced Isambard to break loyalty with his king, break his word, break his oath to the chivalric system. And that set them on a collision course. And so now it becomes this intricate ballet of Isambard waiting for Harry to break, become what everybody else is, and show me you're false,
Hmm.
so that his position could be true, that his
Yeah.
cynicism was justified. And then you see the same scenario play out through the son. Show me it was all an illusion. Show me my cynicism was real and
Hmm.
justified. And this incredible unfolding story where by the time you get to the last book, you realize both characters stayed true to who they were.
Right.
And
And
Harry's son was the one who showed Isambard, yes, it is possible for a human being to stick by their principles.
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
seemed it seemed like both. What was really interesting about both characters, actually, and in particular Harry's son and Isambard, is they both taught each other something throughout the course of those two books. You know, it's like I feel like they both kind of learned from each other. Harry kind of learned, his commitment to keeping his word, I guess you could say.
Well, he set out
Uh,
to murder the guy,
yeah, yeah,
and he was forced to see his father through who he thought was his enemy's eyes.
right,
Mhm.
right. And yet, his decision to go back to I think it's at the end of book two, right, where he goes back to be
Kept his
after
word.
the
Yep.
right, yep, kept his word. And I feel like that Harry is completely, not completely different, but an evolution of the Harry that started that book. You know?
It was, but also
Yeah,
Isambard was waiting for that kid to break his word, because then
yeah,
he would have
yeah.
been
Right.
justified for killing the father.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
So he
The
was trying to justify his whole system and say, I was right to be cynical, I was right to be cruel, I was right to kill him. And he was
Yeah,
proven wrong by encountering two very strong characters that would not bend.
the I think the mutual often begrudging respect between Harry and Isambard and then Harry Jr. and Isambard, I think really stood out to me also.
yeah.
That
And then
you
Isambard's son.
yes, that's true. That's
Right.
true. It it's just amazing that people are in such strong opposition, yet step by step, once you get to the end, it like of course they respect and like love each other. Really,
They were very close together. Closer,
yeah,
love and hate are closer together than love and
Individual.
apathy,
Yeah.
or hate and
yes,
apathy. Apathy is the true enemy. And I think that's the overwhelmingly resounding message of this book, is that
Mm.
love and hate can be so close together.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I think there was a lot with love in here, right? Because all the stuff, I loved everything with Benedetta because I think it added such a deep layer between Harry and Isambard and their conflict. Um, and then seeing it come back around to the three of them again at the end was, I thought it was just beautiful. Like that image that I have of the end is just so strong in my brain. It's just beautiful of how it felt like it felt like it was the moment that the three of them really should have, if that makes sense. Like
Mhm.
Yeah,
they're
and
so
how they lived
connected.
as opposed to the transitoriness, even of the art, even of the church, even of the building in stone.
Yeah.
That in
Yeah.
the end you pass it on to the next generation in another form. But yeah, there was just so much powerful stuff in this that she crammed it into an incredibly small
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Totally. Just saw Joanna's comment come through.
I'd be
Hey,
curious what Joanna
Joanna.
thinks of this book.
Me too.
I just
Me
get the
too.
feeling, Joanna, you're gonna absolutely love this. Like the layers of the character and so much of the things that she talks about on her channel, I feel like this is like right up her alley.
Yeah.
And she doesn't slight the women in medieval
Hmm.
society at all.
Yeah.
Not at
Yeah.
all. She gives them their true role, which too many writers overlook. When they say, oh, medieval fantasy, it was all like that, and that's what they did to women.
Mm.
They're missing the
Yeah.
boat.
Mm.
It was a different culture from ours, but the women were not powerless.
Right. It's interesting now that you mention it, Jenny. I feel like, and I kind of wonder how much this is the case. Like you mentioned Pillars of the Earth as, a lesser version of this, in terms of kind of the themes that are explored, the subtlety of the characters, the more artistic standpoint that the Heaven Tree, looks at that POV. And I kind of wonder is like how many historical fiction novels are there that really just tell you a slice of the reality, but don't give an actual fair shake to the whole
No,
thing,
it's to me, Pillars of the Earth was nasty, brutish, and short. I mean, any book that begins with some parent, abandoning a child and letting it freeze to death because they can't
Yeah.
feed it. Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, it just felt so removed from the human condition.
Mm.
Right.
So I say if you love certain facets of Song of Ice and Fire, you might love Pillars of the Earth, but it felt shallow to me, Pillars of
Mm.
the Earth, both from the standpoint of the history, the standpoint of the culture, the
Yeah.
standpoint of the people who lived at that time, and the standpoint of the actual feel of building a cathedral. You didn't get your hands in the mortar.
Mm. Yeah.
You know, these guys were masons, but you didn't feel their trade under their skin. They were sort of like pieces that were moved across the surface.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it didn't strike me the same way as the hordes of people who think it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But I'd
it's
give an argument any day that I think this book has a ton more meaning.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think like the relationships between the characters and how they evolve over time in this is really unlike most books I've ever read. You know, the well is so deep. You could probably just talk about two characters and their relationship together, and it could be even one that's a minor character, right? And you could have a whole discussion purely based on that.
You know, there's so much more than just the two characters, but that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
playing against the historical backdrop. You
right.
know, and I don't want people to think that I'm disparaging Ken Follett, because Eye of the Needle is freaking brilliant.
Yeah, yeah,
I think his
totally.
style suited that book. His approach suited that book. It was
Mm,
extremely well done. Pillars of the Earth, I bounced off it, but that's possibly because I came from reading other books written as historical fiction that
yeah,
resounded so much more colorfully and genuinely
yeah.
from the period. And I could reel off authors who do that.
Mm,
So maybe if that's the only time you ever read anything that was set around that time period, you'd think, oh, great. But, you know, it's like reading a Patrick O'Brien book and saying, oh, now I know what it's like to sail. The man never sailed, and it's obvious. I adore Patrick O'Brien. He's
yeah.
writing an intricate book about interactions between characters, and he set them on a backdrop of sailing,
Mm,
but it's dry research and it's armchair sailing. He never actually got his feet wet sailing
yeah,
in blue water on a period ship.
Mm.
And so to someone who's done that, you can see the obvious difference. But that's
right.
not the heart of his book. The heart of his book is the relationship between the characters
Mm,
and how
mm,
they're total opposites and how they become best friends, and the humor and the odd moments where they rub
yeah,
elbows. And it's that is his brilliance. So each book has its purpose,
right.
and it's
Yeah.
discovering that without letting your expectations hide it.
So that's why I'm so glad that we all explored this together and that we get to talk about it, because I feel like, you know, and I've seen videos going on about this on BookTube just in general, is like you start to see some of the same books over and over again, you know. And of course, yeah, we all like to read a lot of the same stuff, so it's great. But it's just awesome to throw something completely out of left field, like something that Jake and I may have never picked up. It's like what that does to your worldview when you're reading something you wouldn't necessarily gravitate to
I
at the
would never have
outset.
known about
Mm,
this series if it weren't for my roommate in college.
right,
She
right.
was British and she had these battered up old paperbacks and she loaned them to me. And I said, where's this been? I never saw it in the library. I never saw it
Mm,
anywhere. And then it was published in this omnibus edition in 1993 out of nowhere. And I snagged it
wow.
immediately out of one of those, you know, thick catalogs that used to just list books.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But nobody's heard of it. And I don't understand why. They read her Brother Cadfael series, which he did under a different name.
Hmm.
But this one is completely off the radar and it just
Yeah.
doesn't deserve to be.
No
No.
way. Yeah.
So that says to me marketing failure. The publisher never got behind it and marketed it to the correct audience in the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
went wrong.
For sure. For sure. Um, I would love to hear what you guys thought about the. We've talked a lot about the characters, and rightfully so. The way that the artistic process was written really, really spoke to me. I
Hmm.
remember I was on my huge road trip over the summer when I opened up book one of this, and I read that first passage, and
Yeah.
I just sent a picture of it to a bunch of people, and I was like, guys, like, look at this. This is beautiful. And it was just from that moment, that whole, I think book one has most most of that stuff is in book 1, I think.
Mm-hmm.
There's some in book 2, of course. There's some in book 3, of course. But a lot of it is in book 1 when he's building the cathedral. And it was, I don't know, it just resonated with me so strongly that like, this is what creativity feels like. And this is what
You
flow
don't do
state
it
feels
because
like.
you want to, you do it because you must.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You do it
Totally.
because you must. And if you don't have that must, that desire pushing you, if you
Yeah.
don't have that tremendous force inside of you that says, I have to make something,
Yeah.
then you're not going to last.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And she captured that.
She did. She captured that feeling so well. And the fact that it kind of gets passed down, like we saw Harry's son start to take up the mantle of that. And then even at the
Mm-hmm.
very end, he passes by that little kid who's like using a rock to chisel
Harry in
something.
the jail cell
Yeah.
carving with his dinner spoon
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
a caricature of the jail warden. And the first thing he tells his savior coming to bail him out is, get out of my light.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the snapshot
It is.
of,
You,
author in orbit, do not disturb.
Yes.
you know, that just got me thinking actually about the legacy of the artist, you know? Like, for example, in book 1, Harry Senior, I will call him, his view on art and how it was tied to his moral code and everything, and how he treated his art as something of the, highest deference. That translated, I think, because of course the cathedral is there, afterwards in book 2, but also and Harry Jr. comes across it and everything. But I think also it's like when one puts something like that out, that kind of energy out there, and it manifests in something physical like that, it carries over, to people who are touched by it.
Yeah, but
you know
when you sit down to compose something, Nikhil, when you're in the act of composition,
yeah.
the last thing on your mind is what I'm leaving posterity.
Oh, 100%.
It's
Yeah.
not even signifying.
Yeah.
It is not even present in the room.
Yeah.
Then during the act of creativity, none of that is there when it's genuine. I mean,
Right.
some people may be made that way, but there's
Yeah, it's
nothing
a
in the room but you and the process and what's coming out under your hands.
Mhm.
That art being expressed is the only thing in the room. And honestly, posterity is the one that determines, not your peers, not the
Yeah.
awards, not the people who live while you do, not anybody else. It's the people long after you're dead. And how many times is there a work like this one where it builds this massive, powerful structure that nobody notices? Is it any less for that? I don't think so.
No.
No. There was almost like a meta element to this in a way too. I think like Janie, like you write this book, you create this art, and so many people read it. Or Nikhil, you create this music, and so many people listen to it and sing along and all this stuff. At the end of this, the cathedral is broken down, and people are taking the stones to build their houses.
Mhm.
And it's like, to me, that felt like such a cool metaphor. Like it's being spread now throughout the whole area, and all these people are benefiting.
Was that creation any less of a tour de force for the fact that it did
Absolutely
not
not.
even last past the next generation?
No, of
I
course
think a
not.
tour de force is the art of creating it, period. And
Yeah.
it stops there, because when the artist is gone, they're gone.
Yeah.
They're not in control of it anymore. They're not in control of what becomes of it.
There's a great
No.
Alan Watts quote that paraphrased something about, the purpose of listening to music is not to get to the end of the piece, or it's the movement of the notes. It's like the being inside that music in that moment. And it's same with a book. The purpose of the book is not to get to the end as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But the experience of doing it, and I think like the same thing applies for all art.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
It is the experience shared.
Yeah.
But while you're doing the creation of that experience that eventually will be shared, nobody else is in the room.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I figured this might be a good time to go into full spoilers on books 2 and 3, because I know in the first video we had kind of tackled a lot of the themes in the first book, and the second and third are the Green Branch and Scarlet Seed. I figured this could be a good time to kind of maybe talk about some of those elements that really stuck out to you both, if that's okay. Jake, do you want to go first? Was there anything
Yeah,
in I know they all kind of start to blend together after a while, but
they do,
yeah.
but there's so much. I think that the thing that sticks out in my head the most is at the towards the end of the Scarlet Seed,
Hmm.
when we see the musical chairs of Harry and Benedetta and trying to get to Isambard, and they're like trying to save each other, and they wind up in this situation, Benedetta and Isambard, where they're like locked in the church because they think that they're sick, or they think that they were around someone who was sick,
Yeah.
and we just see them like suffer together. And it was such a hard way to watch these characters end after everything we've been through, but there was also so much love there also. And then the respect that Isambard shows to Harry when he like, and to Benedetta when he's like, hey, you can lie next to him,
Mm.
right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not going to just keep you for myself. I know you actually love him. Like, he's seemed like he was finally accepting that a little bit. And man, that whole sequence at the end just really, really hit me. And the image of Isambard, like when he's so frail and sick and weak, and he scoots Harry over, opening the grave, which is, weird and creepy anyway, but he scoots him over a little bit, lays Benedetta next to him, and then just collapses on top. Like, that was so powerful to me.
Yeah.
Well, it was such a powerful redemption arc because
Yeah.
Harry's
Yeah.
death and Isambard sticking to his principle to the very, very, very end. He could not bend. It put him in a private hell that he could not get out of.
Yeah.
And so I saw the Green Branch and the Scarlet Seed was his effort to shatter that hell by proving that what he had perceived in Harry was flawed.
Mm.
And he
Mm.
couldn't break it.
Yeah.
He couldn't break it. And then when it finally came down to the end and his own son betrayed him, he couldn't break it, so he had to embrace it.
Yeah.
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 And was he really the bad guy the whole time when you look at the fact that Harry caused him to betray his king? And that was the most important.
Right.
He came down on oath breakers of any kind, anyone who stepped out of line in the
Yeah.
societal chivalric order that he had laid out. It was an inevitable train crash, but in the end, that train crash created something, and he actually forgave himself for putting himself in hell. That whole effort where he tried to prove that Harry was really false.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He tried to justify his action and he couldn't. It did not work.
Yeah. And how ironic that he gets blinded right before he finally
Right.
sees at the end.
Right. And that blind adherence to the code created his son who betrayed him.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I feel like it was one of the most beautiful redemption arcs. Not only that,
Yeah.
but for Harry Jr., because Harry Jr. set out to kill him and avenge his father's death. That was
Mhm.
his
Yeah.
big thing.
Yep.
And
Yep.
him having to mature and grow up and realize there's more facets to this.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
face the fact that this man murdered your father, but not out of hatred. He murdered his idol.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
For the crime of forcing him to break his oath to the king. So
Right.
it's such a tangle of conflicting moralities. I love
is.
it because no character is 100% in the right.
Right. Right.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It makes me excited to reread it again at some point to go back to the beginning. And then now with the foreknowledge to see all the little steps along the way.
Yeah, and you see
Yes.
Harry dumping his culture right away, flying in his parents' face, saying,
Yeah.
despite them saying, here's how things are, and these peasants are valuable, and you can't You can't break the code here. You can't do this. And he does it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
He exiles himself from his own family, his own blood,
he does.
for that principle, which he never breaks.
Right.
I loved
Yeah.
how you know, I was so shocked when Isambard went blind. I my thought was, okay, at least from previous things I'd read, the natural inclination would be, okay, Harry Jr. sets off on this redemption, on this vengeance campaign, and has some missteps along the way in book 2, and then it's all going to come to a head in book 3. And I loved that Edith Pargeter went the opposite direction while still achieving some sort of a redemption arc at the end. It's like for every character. I thought that the idea that Isambard was now physically crippled, you know,
He couldn't second guess everybody because he couldn't
couldn't,
see.
yeah, yeah,
He was now the flawed character in his own
Yeah.
game. But also, what a change, because John the Archer was the one who would have been killed if Benedetta hadn't stepped in and Harry
Yeah.
and stopped
right,
it. And it's like, by the time you should have been rooting for John the Archer to go on, do it, man. And you're rooting for him not to kill the guy.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like wrong moment, wrong play. And so it's such a conflicted tapestry of, if you stick to a principle too long and refuse to look past it,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
eventually becomes your weakness.
Yeah,
Yes.
You can tear the world down just as readily by sticking to an ideal that has outworn its time.
Ooh.
How many people do
that's
we
great.
see that start out great humanitarians and then they turn really weird as they get older, and they become fanatical, and they actually
Yeah.
turn evil, and they can't perceive their own impact on the world anymore? It's
Yeah.
like, what happened to you? You started out as such a force for good,
Yeah,
but eventually it became a blinder.
Mm. Yeah.
it's like what you said, Jenny. They're all kind of victims of their own game in a lot of ways, like Isambard is. And I think it's very easy, and I think it's very realistic for our existential life, that it's very easy to lose ourselves in that game. It's very easy to forget that all those stakes are, a lot of times human created, self created.
Mm.
And it was interesting to see how every single character really had that moral compass of their own that both empowered them and also weakened them.
A fixed
Yeah,
ideology
yeah,
builds a
fixed idea.
disaster.
Yeah,
Was Harry's death a triumph, or was it a tragedy because he wouldn't flex?
yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
I think we can all agree we would have hated him if he allowed the child to die.
Yeah.
hmm
But
For sure.
there was another outcome here. He could have run away.
Yeah.
yeah, 100%.
So it's such a conflicted tapestry. You keep thinking about it because there's so many what ifs.
Yes.
What if this person
Yeah,
had been more flexible? What if this person had been willing to bend? What if this person had just lied a little bit? What if this person hadn't kept their word? So it was
right.
like a train wreck of a disaster because they all stuck to their principles no matter what. And then they all paid the price.
Mm.
Yeah.
But in the end, the way she resolved it, it wasn't a tragedy.
No.
I think Isambard as the antagonist is one of the most brilliantly written antagonists I've ever read,
Oh yeah, yeah,
because of the way she built on who he was and his principles, and how his bitterness and his disappointments made him cruel, but he never abandoned what he stood for.
Mm-hmm.
There was a strength to him that was just towering. And
Yeah.
so by the end, when he died, it was like it hit your heart.
Yeah. That really stands out to me when I think back to how I felt about book 1, and when we saw him, he had so much like aura of just like, this guy is bad news, this guy's powerful, he's really intimidating. And by the end, I'm just like, it breaks my heart that he's like going through this.
yeah,
It's funny, the twists and turns and like how we root for character, or like, oh man, you really couldn't compromise just a little bit, or like it's just
No
wow.
person who is quote unquote evil believes that they're evil.
Right, right.
And I think she really shone the light on that in this book
Yeah.
in a way that few authors, many try, few achieve.
Yeah, it reminds me. Everyone talks about they want morally gray characters, or they want a villain who they can sympathize with, or whatever, right? And there's a spectrum of how that's achieved. Of course, some people do it really well, some people, whatever. But like, I can't think of a better example of what people mean when they say they want that
Mm-hmm.
than this, right? Like, I think this is what people actually want, is how Isambard is depicted.
Well, she plays your
Brilliant.
assumptions. You're
Yes.
terrified when young Harry falls into his hands
Yeah.
because you're led astray by your assumptions in many ways.
Yeah. Someone else on this call likes to do that with their books, I think.
Well, it's part of what makes a story tick for me.
Yeah. I love it to death. Yeah. It's one of my favorite things now.
Again, without pulling tricks up your sleeve and without fooling the reader, letting them fool themselves.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's relatively a new thing for me in books, honestly. I've read books with morally gray characters, but then reading Wars of Light and Shadow, reading Heaven Tree, you really start to see the amount of layers of subtlety you can put in that.
Nuance.
Nuance.
Well,
yeah.
those are the books that I really love the best, and
Yeah.
they're not common, and they're hard to find, because I think it's easier for people to enjoy the cut and dried, where they don't have to ask the hard questions,
Sure.
where they don't have to have the conflicted emotion, where they don't have to change their mind about a character they hated through one book and you end up loving by the end, where they don't have to dig under the skin and really see that we have more in common as human beings. It's our shortfalls and our fallacies when we only focus on that, and we lose sight of the complexity of human nature.
Yeah.
Also, I had to add, what did you both think of the false escape in I think it was Green Branch, right? Where Harry believes he's escaped and
I saw
he
that
goes
one
to
coming, because that kid was such a wish-wash. You knew the kid did not have the spine to do anything that courageous, so you knew that was a screw up right from the start, because she laid the tracks for that character to be a cad right from the beginning.
I just thought it was such a crafty thing for Isambard to do, to like lead, have Harry inadvertently lead him to the very thing he was looking for,
Well, and Harry was naive. He fell for it.
Yeah.
He did.
Hook, line, and sinker, because he'd been around a bunch of straight shooters all his life. He didn't see it coming.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was entirely plausible.
Do we remember how old he was at that time? Was he teenager?
He was pretty young when he fell into Isambard's hands. How old was he? He was a kid. Just,
He
I
was
would
young,
say,
for
what,
sure.
14, 15 years old, maybe?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Early teens,
I'd have to go back and look at the timeline of the book.
He's a lot more mature than I was at that age, I'll tell you.
They grew up fast then.
Yeah.
Culturally, you were considered a man a lot younger than you are in our society today.
True, yeah. Even with the average life expectancy at that time being like, what, mid-30s, 40?
Well, that's one of the things that gets me about the time period, when people go, oh yeah, the average lifespan, people live to their 30s or 40s. Average is average. The number of child deaths was so high. If you made it past a certain age, unless you were malnourished or unless you were in some way abused, you could live until you were quite old.
Oh, yeah.
So when you say average life expectancy, that is an average.
Right.
We forget that in the age of vaccines, where most children survive.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
In this cultural time period, most children did not survive.
Yeah, right.
And in particular, I had a fascinating insight when I did the research for Fugitive Prince, and I had to do huge research into childbearing, because I wanted to choose a scenario to open the book that wasn't the usual Mal presentation. And I read books and I read journals from traveling midwives from the United States in the 1700s, and I read doctor's manuals, and I read academic theses from people who'd made a study of this, and it was just jaw-dropping what I learned. The
Really?
church and their repression of women and their repression of knowledge and the rise of the male doctor, the male physician, killed more women in Europe than you can imagine. Your chance of surviving childbirth in Europe were very low. But if
Wow.
you were lucky enough to be in the Americas, you survived because they were following what was known by the Native Americans, and your child might have a high degree of loss. You would lose the baby, but the mother survived, and she was usually still fertile.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
a journal of a traveling midwife in Maine, she's pretty famous, that delivered 1,600 babies. She lost only 4 mothers in 1,600 childbirths. And they were to what looks like eclampsia, the high blood pressure that
Oh,
puts
wow.
women into seizures, because there was no cure for that.
Hmm.
4.
That's an
4.
insanely low.
But she
Yeah.
lost 3 out of 4 babies.
Right.
Because the babies did not necessarily make it. If the difficult birth was a problem, the child would not make it. Whereas in Europe, the statistic was flipped.
Wow.
So, yeah, it blew my mind. It was like, my God, you know, and in the 1920s, even still, women died because male doctors. And what shocked me the worst was I did this research in the 80s? In the 1920s, if you went into a malpresentation, your doctor knew how to turn the baby. Your
What do you
vet
mean?
knows how to turn a foal if you had a foaling mare or a calf. Your doctor goes straight to a cesarean now. They're not even taught how to do it. So if you don't have a fully equipped hospital and you don't have a midwife who's been trained to turn a child that's malpresented, you're screwed. That was terrifying to me, that knowledge
Wow.
was so
Yeah.
quickly lost. And this was in the 80s.
That's insane.
They stopped teaching it. And I talked to women who were in PhD or medical school, and said, what do you do when you get a malpresentation? That's why I started my research. Oh, we go to a cesarean. Those don't survive. We go straight to a cesarean. I'm going, don't tell me that in the 1920s they didn't know how to turn a baby. They did, but the knowledge is lost or thrown away.
Interesting.
You'd have to look culturally sideways from Western culture to find it. So I think how many things are lost because our technological progression or what we deem important to save.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's where I think a book that's set in this time period misses the boat, is because they had their own set of knowledge, and for the most part, a lot of it worked.
Yeah. It's interesting how it's hard to find books that depict this particular period of time in a realistic way, in the way people would interact with each other at that time. You know, like so many of those nuances are lost throughout history.
Well, you'd have to go to an author that took the time to do the research, or read someone like Judith Tarr, who is a PhD historian. The historians are always speaking up and saying Europe was a lot more diverse than people claim. It was not racist. It was not what you think it was. And they're constantly yelling at fantasy writers for saying, oh, yeah, well, that was just the time period and women got raped all the time. And this was.
Right.
So I think that the refuting knowledge is always there, but is it being listened to? Because the popular opinion overrides it. And we see that often. You know, how many people read The Guns of August and say, I know how the origins of that war started, and it's bullshit. The Guns of August is just completely, purely, totally historical baloney. And yet, every time things heat up, they all go and run and read The Guns of August, and you just go, how many times do you have to refute this stupidity? But common culture says that's what you read when you want to find out how the rise of, etc.
Right.
And so you
Interesting.
you
Yeah.
shake your head because there are plenty of experts, but who wants to listen to them?
Well,
It's
I
the, you know,
suppose.
that adage is true. The more I learn, the less I know, right? Um,
True. And also,
Tell me.
who was the one who pounded the soapbox? And what was the opposing view? And what was the cultural context? And what would another culture think of that soapbox? They'd
yeah.
probably laugh you out of the room. In other words, there's so many facets that you could pursue
Yeah.
to arrive. I think that, the old quote, what is truth, is so accurate because whose truth are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
That was it's so funny that I never thought about that until actually like a few years ago when I read Malazan and all the historian stuff that's in there.
Mm.
Yep.
And I was just like, oh, this is how this probably went, right? And it just kind of makes you think about,
Do we
you know,
even know?
do we
Because
know?
culturally, those are dead cultures.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
assuming our own values and sticking them on top. I guess I had a mind blowing moment when I opened a book on, what was it? It was a book on cosmology written from the standpoint of 20th century physics, okay?
Mm.
And it said, these people, and it was, we know about the solar system, we know the planets go around we know how our solar system works. And look at this stupid writing from what? It was from Wales. And they're going, what the heck? They don't know anything about it because they grouped these planets together and these planets together and these planets
Mm.
together, and they didn't get that they all go around the sun. And I looked at that and I go, wow, they're comparing an astrological delineation of the solar system where they grouped the planets by air, water, fire. They were grouping them by energetic
Mm. Yeah.
principles. They were grouping them by astrological principles. They were grouping them by a whole other system of knowledge that those people followed
Right.
with no knowledge that they were not looking at the planets that don't go around the sun. And I said, what level of ignorance were these people coming from that they didn't understand what time period and what this person who wrote that manuscript at that
Wow.
time was saying? Even if Christian archangels, you look at that and how is the energetic template parsed? It was the same that was in that cosmology. It was the same that was, but because it wasn't sun centered with all the planets in their correct orbits, they said this is that they were completely ignorant people. And that's what I love about Erickson is he says none of these civilizations were ignorant. They were just running off a different scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were setting things into a different order of value.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes that knowledge gets passed down in the way that the ruler tells you to pass it
In
down.
wacky ways. I mean, here we are sitting in
Right.
Western culture and we're going, the most powerful people that you don't mess with are the ones who have the big guns. So you build up your army and you build up your arsenal and you build up your rockets and you build up enough stuff to blow up the world 10 times over. When you look 2 steps sideways on another continent to another culture who says the best way to disarm your enemy is feed them. Have enough plenty that you give them what they need and you'll have no enemies. Which would you rather do?
Yep.
And yet the one hand can't talk to the other hand.
Yeah.
Give stuff away so you don't need enemies. So nobody's hungry. This
Mm.
isn't communism. It's common sense.
Right. Yeah. It's fair. That's fair.
That's why I feel like just when I think about books like Heaven Tree, I feel like it's not only a great read, and obviously we're all fans of it, but I also feel like it's important to read books like this because for us, what I feel like books are a great way to turn the mirror on yourself, and we learn so much about ourselves and also how we function in the world, how people function, with each other. I feel like the way the characters are expressed in this, the subtlety of them, once you start to understand the motivations for them, you start to realize just like, it almost feels cliche to say, oh, it's not black and white, the world is not black and white, but that's just an intellectual understanding, but you kind of experience it through the eyes of these characters, and that's like a deeper understanding. I think the more people read stuff like this, the better they can
What is
function in the
evil?
world, you know?
What is evil?
Yeah.
What is evil? People go, oh, evil and good. They are opposites. To me, evil is when you stop questioning that there's another way to do something. So
Mm.
you give up your intelligence in exchange for something violent because you don't believe there's another way.
Yeah.
Mm.
So evil in a way is closing your mind to other options, other ways of thinking, other ways of doing things, other ways of solving a problem. You stop believing in your own power to find an alternate route. And then you step into
Yeah.
something that's kind of dark.
Sure.
But it isn't because you knew too much. It's because you stopped asking questions and you settled for knowing too little. That to me is evil.
Mm.
Mm.
Interesting. Yeah, I
Beautifully
haven't.
said.
Hmm.
Sorry, Jake,
Yeah.
you were gonna say something?
No, I'm just processing that. That was really interesting.
It's intelligence that doesn't believe in its own ability to solve a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I like that.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking about how like Nikhil, you said it's important to read things like this. And I think that you said that very like that was very eloquently said. I
Oh.
think another reason is like look where this discussion went. You know, we read this book and we're talking about the book, but then it gets into like
The best books do that. The best
such
books do
bigger,
that. They
deeper
crack
things.
something open and they move the
Mm.
horizon and they change the bar.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. I think that's it's just I don't even know. It's it transcends the book itself, right? The things that we
Mhm.
then discuss because of the book. And that's so cool. That's
And
becoming
I
one of my
love
favorite
that she
things.
does it in such a positive way. She doesn't do it by wrecking
Yeah.
the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really
Yeah.
like obviously dark things happen, but I wouldn't call this a dark story.
And it isn't
Right.
even that the church survived all of this. What
Right.
survived was the human beings and their interaction.
Yeah.
That's what was important, not the stone,
Yeah.
which
Right.
went on to other purposes,
Mm-hmm.
which went on to build something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The cathedral itself had a lasting effect on the area. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
This was good. I'm so glad we read this.
I'm so
Me
glad that
too.
you took the chance and joined me in giving it a try because
Yeah.
you know
This was this
it
was an
was a step out of
experience.
your bailiwick and you took a
Uh-huh.
chance on it, and I appreciate that you took my word that this was a really great book.
Yeah. You haven't steered me wrong yet, so I don't know. I trust you.
I definitely want to do, it's kind of, I feel like this was a doorway to a different way about thinking, of thinking about reading and what kind of books I want to read. And I feel like that's something I want to be a mainstay in my pursuit of great written material, is finding something a little out of my comfort zone,
When you're
and making
ready,
that, yeah.
I can give you a few more on the list. Either
Sweet. All right.
they can be short and they can be long, or they can be complicated, or they can be very
Yeah.
simple. They can be written in an economical way where they move very quickly
Yeah.
and wear the guise of popular fiction, but they're a whole lot more than that. So, I don't want to cram your reading list, but when you want another one, I have a box full of nuggets.
Sweet. All right. I'm
Yeah.
in.
Awesome. Well, maybe that's something the three of us can read together at some
That'd be
point in the
great.
future here. That'd be cool. I would love to do it
That'd be
again.
fantastic. Yeah.
Well,
This
thank
is
you so much for doing this.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Yeah, this has been such a fun ride, and I'm
Yeah.
just so grateful that we all got to read it together.
And
Yeah.
maybe we
And
can give this lady's work a renaissance.
yeah,
I hope so. I've had probably at least a dozen people reach out and like show me
yeah,
the photo of them having ordered the book and
All
like
right, well, let's
are
see if
really
they
excited.
actually
It's
read
awesome.
it.
yeah,
We'll see.
I
I
think
hope
you'll
so.
know because the number of people who end up watching this discussion will
hmm
slowly grow over time.
Yeah.
I think this will be like an evergreen kind of a video in that respect. It's like slow uh, growth of more people being exposed to it, which
Yeah.
is always the goal.
Yeah. For sure.
So, wonderful. Well, thank you both again. Thanks for everyone who watched. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem, and we will hopefully be back with more videos to come as we read more underrated classics. But thanks for watching, everyone. Take care.
See you later.